All right, Andy.
Edward.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you. We are back together. This is What's Left from San Francisco, California. And here we are continuing our weekly political discussion, challenging the political left, the mainstream left, of course, and you challenging me.
Both of us.
All right. So originally we were going to do part 2 of AMLO, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, which is the newly president-elect of Mexico. And this was going to be part 2. But as we were having the discussion over the week, I think we were morphing the idea of elections in general and society. What does that mean? Does it have any validity? Is it as it relates to, I don't know, as it relates to revolution, as it relates to the differences in our political stands and positions?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the conversation we were having over the phone.
Yeah. We're going to see if this is going to work today, because this is a little bit more free-formed. There's so much crap going on. Trump and NATO and Russia. That's coming, I believe, next week. But this week, we're actually going to stay with, I feel like, with what we started a discussion last week about AMLO, who is a left-wing populist candidate elected in Mexico. And for me, the question comes up, which I think exists really on the left, is can you get the kind of change you want through the ballot box? Mm-hmm. It's kind of the change. I'm hoping that's the discussion we can have today.
Sure.
Yeah. And we'll see where it goes.
All right, and we will not have any graphics this time. Like last time, it was really nice, by the way. I liked it. So for our podcast listeners.
All right.
Well then,
should I start?
Yes.
Okay.
What is your deal?
Right. Okay. So here's what I think is interesting about this. The week before our discussion about AMLO, we also talked about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes.
And many on the left are debating. Socialists on the left are debating whether or not she can be getting in some ways involved in her campaign can be a way of making change. And she's in the Democratic Party. I think that's a complete death for the left to try to see her and left-wing Democrats as a place where we can go to try to make change. It's actually, like I said, I think we get changed. We don't change the Democratic Party. But AMLO presents a different sort of figure. He's not part of the mainstream parties, the PRI, the PAN, or even the PRD. Mm-hmm. He formed his own party, which has 2 parts to it: a left-wing Labor Party and a more right-wing conservative group. But his candidacy is definitively left-wing. Mostly left-wing. I shouldn't say that. And it's clear it's from that populist left-wing base. And he's won election. And so that kind of candidate will also arise here in the United States. And I think the question emerges, well, what do you say about that? I think the left-wing Democrats are not even, there shouldn't even be a discussion, in the fact that there is one. It shows the weakness of the left. But for this kind of candidate, what do socialists, revolutionaries say, and then what do people like yourself say about that?
Yeah.
So, I think my first statement is I think there's two answers it gave, and they might be the same, and I haven't fully thought this through. My first statement is for socialists in the United States. I think we would say, okay, to the extent that AMLO, there's a question people have is the enemy of your enemy your friend? And once AMLO enters the Mexican state, he becomes part of the capitalist class.
Can you say become like an alliance? Why do you have to say your friend?
I'm just using that term, because I do think you can also say, can the enemy of your enemy be an ally?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Because I don't think they can be a friend, but can they be an ally? Mm-hmm. So you're getting ahead of me, but I like it.
All right.
That's good. And once you enter that state, you are working within a capitalist center. And he's going to be operating with his coalition. He's operating as a member of the capitalist class seemingly in some ways trying to do things for them, but also pushing against them within Mexico. So what do socialists in the United States say about that? I would say that to the extent to which he exposes the U.S. empire in terms of its criminal behavior around the war on drugs in Mexico, its criminal behavior about militarizing its border, in terms of the NAFTA agreement being a pilfering of their resources, to the extent that AMLO exposes that, he is our ally here in this country. Anytime he exposes my ruling class and takes their pants down and shows everyone how criminal and gangster my own ruling class is, and says, please, and additionally, hopefully would say, please, U.S. workers, do something about your gangsters, okay? Then he's an ally, even though he's among any enemy territory, he's an ally in our cause.
All right.
At the same time, so I will say that. Anytime he does that kind of exposure, he's that. Anytime he reaches some sort of agreement with the United States around NAFTA to make a better agreement for them and makes it better maybe for some section of the capitalist class in Mexico, maybe partially for workers, but ultimately maybe extracts something out of our ruling class, but also gets a deal from the ruling class. Anytime he acts in conjunction with my ruling class, he is no longer my ally. He is basically not only working kind of in collaboration with them, but he's working to keep the system, make this myth that the system can be worked out for all of us, which I don't think is true. So I'll start with that. Is that a good start? I can say more, but I'll start with that because I also think, well, what do we say about Mexican socialists? But I'm going to talk about U.S. socialists right now.
Yeah, I think AMLO wants to do that. I think he from everything he is saying, like he doesn't have a politician background. He himself was an activist, and I think when I look at his track record, even working in Mexico City, I do think that he has changed the way he has been from being a political activist to someone as a politician in power. I do not think that he can completely cause no one. I think if you look at even Brazilian, I was mentioning in the last video, even Dilma Rousseff, who was part of a socialist party as well, and when she came into power, it's very hard to have you can only reform. It's really challenging to make a complete transformation in government, and I think AMLO recognizes that, and that's why I stressed in the last video. I think that he is intending to at least dismantle and create a platform from which other people who are going to be elected cleanly, and to decrease the fraudancy and the corruption that exists in Mexico. And I think that is a step that Mexicans want. They want a clean democracy. It will not be clean, but he was going to try to make it as much as possible. But as far as yes, I think he will expose that there's a lot of corruption tied to U.S. and Mexican politics together, like drug and war. But if you're expecting or I'm not saying you're expecting, but if people are expecting for AMLO to work outside of the ruling class, right, I really do not think that is going to happen.
No.
He is not going to, and I retract on my last statement. I misspoke. I spoke too soon about NAFTA. He is renegotiating that, and through the cracks there will fall many of the things that are not going to be in favor of the working class, and that's why I kept saying that he is not the complete answer. I do think that he is a tremendous step for Mexican politics, different from the U.S. politics. Tremendous step for to be heard from us, to be heard, and we shall just see how. I sort of compare it to like Pope Francis, and how even though I'm in a disagreement in the way that it's worked, but he has definitely changed much of the way that he wanted to be as a pope in the Vatican, from over expenditures, and living a more humble life and changing his message on the way that Catholicism is supposed to be. I say not completely, right? But like AMLO is also trying to work within a circle as well. But I mean, he is still, it's a third party, something that in the US you don't have, not even listening to debates of a third party. But I do think that it is false hope sometimes.
I mean,
and should we work with these people? Should we have an alliance with these people? I personally have stated in the 2 videos past, I said yes.
Yeah.
I think that it is easier to challenge people that are on the left, on this side, and you call them these people, these ilk, right? The people like Cortez, right? The people like AMLO. I think they're easier to challenge. This is my.
Well, first of all, I'm making a big distinction because he's not officially in like an established capitalist party. That's a big difference.
Yes.
And Cortez is trying to. Ocasio-Cortez is a part of an apparatus that's trying to fool us.
Okay.
That's what I would say. But first off, my prediction, honestly, although I'm saying that any time that the Mexican government, when he's in December, right? Anytime it exposes the United States and exposes it for its criminality, I'll be echoing that and saying, thank you, you're helping us. You're helping the working class, helping our cause. You're helping the global cause for the potential for working class revolution, at the very least by exposing our ruling class to workers here, okay? And some workers here, and our ruling class is not going to like it. They're going to use racism and nationalism to push back on him.
Yeah.
And the job of U.S. socialists is to basically do not allow them to divide us. We have to say, no, he's right, you know? Now, he's not a socialist, and nor is he pretending to be one.
Yeah.
And I personally believe that he's actually going to work very well with Trump. Not because they're friends, but because I actually think they both operate in a very similar fashion. And when I say work well, I actually think there's going to be more of a almost negotiation of equals that's going to go forward there. That's going to help AMLO with regards to his ruling class, and I think it's going to help Trump with regards to making it seem like he can make a deal. That's my prediction. So
why do you say that?
Because I think that's why the Mexican ruling class has embraced him, because he's been able to like, particularly when he was governor of Mexico City, he was able to basically gentrify the city while simultaneously giving some of the people dividing wealth just enough that people would feel like, oh, this is right. So he's going to be able to sell a better deal to the Mexican working class while making tough deals with his own capitalist class, but also he has been critical of the United States. So he's going to use that as a starting point and not say, I'm not going to be your whipping dog like who was the last
Enrique Peña Nieto.
Nieto is his last name. Okay. Peña
Nieto.
Nieto. So that's just a prediction, but I don't think that's so useful. I mean, I'm just saying we'll see what happens. But the fact is he's not a friend of the working class of the United States. The friend of the United States working class is the Mexican working class, and AMLO has become now an enemy of, I would say, an enemy of the Mexican working class in relationship to the need and the desperate need here to make a revolution, a socialist revolution, and he is going to both obscure that need I do believe by delivering some small reforms. May feel important because they've been getting nothing and the government is so corrupt, and he's also going to make it seem like I'm going to make the government less corrupt, and he's going to do some things like I'm going to live differently, I'm going to cut wages and things like that.
Yes.
So it's going to obscure the task in front of Mexican workers, right?
Mexican president plane and things like
that, and make a revolution, which is what is going to need to happen. And in that regard, he's not our friend. He's not the friend of Mexican workers. But if he does call a demonstration in relationship to things, I do think there's going to be an opening there for Mexican socialists to say, this is how we're going to make change, not by following our president, by becoming independent. But I don't know if he's going to be doing too much of that from the presidency, which he did do out of power, and calling for occupations of intersections and things like that. So I would just say that that's my. I guess
I'm just trying to figure out for people like myself, if we're going to be as a socialist, what would you expect from AMLO then? What would you like? Would you want something like the Venezuelan government or the Cuban government? Is that what you were sort of expecting that for? Because honestly, the way that Mexican politics are designed, they're not completely like the U.S., but they sort of resemble more than other you do not have what you have in Venezuela. You
Yeah.
have Chavez went on to be president for terms after terms after term after term after term.
Yeah.
We at least have these
Yeah.
terms, and it resembles, even though there's a lot of corruption. And in 1988, which I posted and I put the link, there was that the machines were disconnected, and once you connect it again, all of a sudden you have the pre-government again winning the election, and you stole the elections. Yes, we have that, but you look at Brazilian politics now. I think of Latin America. In comparison, Mexican politics are very similar to the U.S. politics. I'm not saying the political positions and political, but I'm saying, what are you expecting then from, like, as a socialist,
right,
for Mexican people? This is a very big win. I'm not defending completely. I did already state that AMLO isn't the answer, but I'm just curious for our audience, if they're going to be wondering, because they're going to be listening to this, and they're going to say, well, what is it exactly that...
If this isn't good enough, then what do you want?
Right? Yeah, how would it ideally look like?
And again, remember, this guy is so much, he is different than anything we've had in this country.
Yes.
The last person we had, I mentioned before, was Eugene Debs, running from prison, but he didn't win the presidency, So this guy's now won the presidency from seemingly outside, okay? So remember, we are not talking about the left wing of the Democratic Party here.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Everyone.
All right. Whether we agree, I'm just saying I'm not talking about the left wing of the Democratic Party, which is death for the movement. So the way I would maybe take that question is, okay, Andy, he's not a socialist. AMLO's not a socialist.
Yeah,
what would you want a socialist to do if they got there? Like, you're not happy with this. What would you want? Maybe that's the way.
We had Dilma Rousseff, who was actually tortured herself as a socialist.
So here's the best. The best example I can give is there's a book I read a long time ago called the Bolsheviks in the Duma, which was talking about how revolutionary socialists operated in a kind of parliament in Russia prior to the Russian Revolution. And here's what they did, which this is what I would want from my socialist revolutionary who is in there, in power, is they would not, and this is how they operated. The people, the Bolsheviks, put forward outrageous resolutions that there's no way the Duma could swallow, as a means of showing people below them that this is not your body. This state is not the body you want. So the kinds of demands that a socialist would be making of the state are demands the state can't make, which is, okay, give up all your private property. We're going to dismantle the police. We're going to arm the workers, and whenever they go on strike, we're going to give them weapons. Any worker who goes on strikes, you're allowed to use the weapons. Just stuff that is really, that's what the revolution would call for. That you call for the actual things that would be the tasks for the revolution.
And these were elected.
From that, they were elected, and it was illegal sometimes, and they went to jail because they said some of this stuff. They went too far sometimes, but because it was illegal to be a revolutionary, everyone called themselves socialists, but you had to be the kind of nice, kind of Bernie Sanders socialist in public. That's not true in our country. We don't actually have those laws yet. We would if we actually operated like that, but whatever. But that's what I would expect. I would expect my job, if I was elected, is to show workers who are not in the state, this is not your state. I'm trying to do the things that you need to happen, and they're not going to let me do it. I don't mean I'm trying to get you minimum wage. I'm trying to eliminate wage slavery. I'm trying to say that corporations don't actually own those things that you as workers do. So I'm going to create rules that you can vote to, you can have elections in your workplace to get control of your business. That's just random stuff. Or when you go on, I'm eliminating Taft-Hartley. In fact, every time there's a strike, you can, it's going to be a holiday, then anybody can go on strike. That's what I'm going to make that rule for the government. And they're going to kill me. Why don't we kill me? They're going to go after me for saying these things. They're going to say I'm trying to disrupt the government. I'm going to say, absolutely, this whole thing has to go down. I want this taken down. And workers, the faster you do that, the better off we are. So again, there's smart ways of doing that. I don't mean smart as in conservative. I just mean you've got to find those pressure points, and that's how the Bolsheviks operated. Is they found what those pressure points were around their entry into World War I, around certain laws, around labor laws. So that's what I would expect. I would expect you to look like an actual revolutionary up there, not like a person who's trying to manage things with the capitalists and trying to put a nice face on the state.
I see. Yeah. All right.
That makes sense, at least, right?
Yeah. That's very concrete that you gave.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very clear. Where do I go from
Okay, we're done.
No, seriously, that was very clear. I can see now, for me, how when we have elected officials, how we do want do want them to push back
Right.
within like when they're elected, and they start pushing back,
Right.
then they're deemed mad.
Right.
They're like, you're not doing things correctly from the book.
Right.
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 And they're thought of as very cuckoo, very people who are just going off.
Right. Right.
And they would have to, like, I guess I have not seen that in the USA. I have not seen that.
You haven't seen that
anyone to be like,
no one's done that in the time we've been in politics in any country.
Challenging the establishment,
Like
challenging
that,
the status quo,
challenging the actual operations of the existing state, and saying this whole thing's got to go down, and I'm urging you to take it down. You know, and I mean, you don't have any. I mean, I'm trying to think back in like U.S. history if there has anybody in. Like, I imagine people like Debs might have said it, but they didn't win power. Like, they didn't go into office.
So, I was just pondering how, if thinking back on U.S. history, I have not thought of anyone that is elected that pushed so drastically for such transformation within government here in the USA. I'm trying to think as well in Mexican history, politics. I mean, it was in. Yeah, I cannot think of anything. I mean, you can't. In history, can you find anything that I do not?
The closest thing I can think, and this isn't the same thing, I think there were politicians during World War I or World War II who might have been elected and called for the U.S. to not go into those wars or things like that. But really, socialists in wartime would be saying, no. Not only are we not going to war, I reject this. This is what you'd be saying in Congress. I reject this war, and I call on workers, our military, to come back here and basically take down our government. Let's turn imperialist war into civil war. Mm-hmm. That's what we mean. It's like if your government's refusing to give up on war, this government is now a criminal government that needs to be taken down. I call on workers to do that, and I call on our soldiers who are on the front to get out of there, come back home, and take up arms against your government, which has it out against you. That's what you'd be saying. And then you'd be thrown in prison.
There are two politicians that I can think of actually that have said some things. I know they're not they wouldn't consider themselves to be socialists, but there are two politicians when the House in 2008, when there was this economic crash, there was a politician, was it 2008? We'll recheck this, but she called for workers to squat in their homes. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember this, but she did say here in the USA.
Okay.
In the USA, she said that the economic crisis was so grand that it wasn't fair for people. They couldn't pay their mortgages, and they could not keep up, and the home loaners were just stealing from soon to or people who are aspiring to be homeowners. And she said in public here in the USA, she said, I call for all people that if you cannot pay, squat in your homes. She did say this. She says, everyone should just squat in their homes. So that is one thing. The other one that comes up for me is Barbara Lee, that said she was the only person that was against the war in Iraq.
Right.
She was the only one that called.
Right.
So I mean, and she called out the U.S. government and all this, and she was the only one out of all senators and representatives. Yes. So to give just a tiny bit of credit, I do think that there are these outliers that have said something, and everyone thinks of them as just
cuckoo.
Yeah, they think they're mad.
Yeah. Well, everyone up at the top of society. I mean, people I can often be inspired by it and stuff like that. And I wouldn't. I mean, it would be good. I mean, I think I wouldn't be surprised if AMLO did a similar thing in moments of pushing back against his. And if he's not getting exactly what he wants, I could see him using the influence he has among the Mexican people to push them into action and build that pressure. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, but you understand that for me, what I would want the socialists to do, I think, based on what I think what the Bolsheviks did, and this is just prior to their socialist revolution that happened only, this was reading about them operating in 1912, 1914, prior to the revolution, 1917, is they were mostly there to expose the nature of that state, to say this state doesn't work for you. Like it can't be reformed into making it work. Which Barbara Lee, I'm brave stand against the war, but she wasn't trying to basically say this state is a capitalist state, take it down. You know, that's this additional step that would be part of all that.
I agree with that statement. Yes.
And it's harder. I mean, I admit. And the fact is that we don't have anything close to a level. Not only is the left ideologically weak, it's obviously numerically weak. We don't have anybody who represents that kind of position who can run for office, then win for office, and then start doing those things from that position of office. And then, of course, I do think that person would be threatened with arrest and all that kind of stuff for doing it. Now, they wouldn't be operating from the position of presidency. They'd be operating from the position of Congress or something like that, because I don't think there's any way they could make it through all the different vetting systems that the capitalist state has to make sure that they don't deal with people like that. And unfortunately, our left is so right now enthralled by the Democratic Party that it will not offer anything independent, because that's what that is. That is really not. That's just not independent. That's not like a workers' party. That's a revolutionary party putting forward its own candidate to say our candidate's going to go in there and gum the works up altogether and expose your madness to everyone. You know, we're going to use that position literally as just as a way of exposing you, like like a newspaper or online or whatever. You know, from that position. So.
Then I would encourage, I mean, there are some, here in San Francisco, there are some socialist parties, and they have run for office. And I have a few friends who have run for office, and, well, I know them. But and I think that I wondered, why were they running for office if you're going to be working with, but they're running as socialists. And I think that they are trying. Would you run for office or something like that to try to change and to push back?
The ones that I've seen that have run, and I've voted for them at times. I think Gloria de la Riva, I think I voted for, governor of California. They've really run as really almost more like extreme reformists, you know, even though they consider themselves socialist revolutionaries.
Hold on, people are going to watch this.
No, I'm just saying
that party, so you need to explain that.
What I mean is, it's like, well, I'm not going to ask for a $15 minimum wage. I'm going to ask for a $30 minimum wage. I agree with that, but that's not a revolutionary. Like that's not exposing the state. It's basically, you know, and there is a theory called the transition program, around which you make demands on the state which expose it, which are reformist demands, but expose it that they can't produce it unless there's a revolution.
Yeah,
I don't buy that. That notion of kind of leading workers with breadcrumbs, like fight for this reform, and then when you fight for that reform, we'll give you another reform, then another reform, and then we'll lead you. I don't believe in that. For one, it's a kind of way of, it's very patronizing. It's a way of lying to workers. I just think you basically say what you. It's not just about the truth of the fact that we're calling for a revolution. It's the fact that there's no other way around these problems. Like, you know, there's a clamoring going on in the U.S. ruling class for a more competitive, more militaristic approach to Russia, you know, and coming from the liberals and the Democratic Party, you know, which is hilarious for me actually to watch this happen, but it's also extremely dangerous. And it's that's where we're heading. We are heading to this sort of multipolar World War I, World War II kind of scenario where all the different countries become national poles and they have to fight it out in war to figure out who's going to be the next big dog. So there's only one way of stopping that, which is socialist revolution. So we have to put that before workers as an immediate task, because if we don't say we got to do it now, we will never begin. We will never even start the process. And so that's why I would probably still vote for those socialists, but I think we need to do something different. That's partly why I'm doing this. You know, I'm thinking through what do socialists really need to do, because I think we've been doing that, and I don't think it works. And we need to actually use those campaigns. And frankly, right now, the only thing for me, it's about working in my workplace, finding other people who consider themselves radicals, and doing study groups and reading about our history, and then trying to figure out how do we build struggle at our own site. Honestly, that's the scale of things right now. It's like me and 2, maybe 3 other people, and we're trying to coordinate, and we're not there. We're not even operating in that way. We're just we all recognize that we consider ourselves each other revolutionaries, and we respect each other, but we haven't even formed a little grouplet, and we're talking about 3 people. So that to me is the scale of the project right now. 3 people at your work, and I've been trying to build something with another colleague who she considers herself a socialist. Have been building at our site for like 18 years, and we have very little to show for it. So I'm not optimistic, but that is the project. It's building from below. And socialists have thought that we can skip that by running for office and projecting downward. It just hasn't worked, because all it's done is dilute our name and dilute our message, and made people confused about what socialism and revolution really is, and how it's rooted in the notion of the working class, and things like open borders, and things like the Mexican working class. Those are my friends. I need to get rid of that border so we can actually collaborate and be allies. That border is my enemy, and workers who don't see it that way are falling for capitalist, nationalist, and racist games.
I am very optimistic in Mexico, because currently, I have not seen this in the USA, but currently there are villages in Mexico that self-govern themselves, have gotten rid of drug trafficking, and police themselves. Neighbors police themselves.
Right.
And they do their own elections, and they don't do it by paper. There are some villages that vote by queuing up for your candidate.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So there's no voter fraud.
Right.
You can clearly see visually,
Yes.
physically, that
Yeah.
everyone is
Yeah.
voting for this
Yeah.
candidate or that, and there aren't any hard feelings. People are voting just for this candidate. And they got rid of their mayor, and they decided to elect. Every neighborhood has their representative, whether you like it or not. If you're voted for that, you have to go and represent your neighborhood.
Right.
And there's documentaries, and I will post a link on for this video.
And that sounds closer. I don't know. I haven't heard of that.
Yeah.
But that does sound closer to truly alternative institutions. You're not just trying to get themselves elected to their state, their mayor's office there, but you're like, no, we have our own process, and we have our own institutions that we're building to run ourselves. That sort of self-government, working class self-government, is what needs to be generalized across Mexico and across the globe. AMLO is getting in the way of that recognition, if you know what I mean, for Mexican workers. So
that's why I was actually in supporting Marichuy, which is an indigenous. She was an indigenous candidate running for office, because she was trying to push for something similar to what she's used to in these indigenous self-governing groups, villages in Mexico. But people thought she is mad.
Right.
She's completely mad.
But you don't think she's...
I don't think she's mad. Yeah. I think she is amazing. I just... Sometimes here in the USA, I don't see things like this happening. So for me, this is why I've okay, I'll hop onto Bernie Sanders train.
Right.
But I don't see any Marichuy here.
No.
An indigenous person standing up and saying, get rid of the police. She says, we will police ourselves.
Right.
Our neighbors will police ourselves.
Yeah.
Women will demand for higher wages.
Right.
And will have equal rights, and will decide what to do with their bodies, and we will have midwives to decide what to do for our health, for the way that we deliver our babies. And she was very strong as well on how holistic health has to be mixed in with conventional medicine, as well as giving indigenous people back their land, something that was a threat to people, mestizos, which are people like myself, who don't consider themselves to be indigenous people, but were mixed blood. And she fought against that, and she's saying, and then people were shut her down.
People at the top.
Yes. Yeah. So they didn't give her a voice.
Right.
And they didn't allow her to even be in the debates.
Right.
And they allowed AMLO, because but he's also persistent as well.
Yeah.
But he is also relatable, I think, to
and
a lot of
track
people,
record
to the middle class.
Yeah, and he has a track record that they he's a danger at part to, or he's a risky, but he's a track record that they trust. She is a complete outsider, a complete radical, and I do think that the kind of politician I would support is going to elicit that kind of response from the politicians. Are you kidding me? No way. And not so that I do think It's interesting. You mentioned him,
Yeah.
her 2 weeks ago, and I think that is closer to what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Somebody who's literally going to use their campaign to call for alternative institutions that need to be built.
Giving back land. I
Right.
thought,
Now, she might not be coming explicitly from the working class.
Yeah.
She's more from like farmers and things like that. But that kind of candidate, you know, and we need working class candidates who do the same thing. So, but we don't demand that of them. And partly it sounds like she partly has risen because there's people participating in these things and saying, hey, you've got to represent us, you know. So, and when our movement begins to get its crap together, maybe we'll begin to say these are the sorts of leaders we need to put forward our goals on a bigger scale.
when I think of all this, Andy, I think now the USA is so behind.
We are effing behind. No, we're not just
Because
behind.
we have, I mean, it's true now that we are discussing this, you know, we have a lot of communities that are self-governed.
Right.
As well in Chiapas, they set up their own school institutions that are not government-owned.
It is important to understand that the U.S. ruling class, capitalist class, is not just strong because it's able to project it. It's the degree to which it smashed its own working class. In relationship to its... And workers here think they're free. We're the most imprisoned mentally, but also in terms of oppressive apparatus.
Yeah.
Probably the most... We're one of the most imprisoned working classes in all sorts. And we don't even know it. And that's what's so sad, is it's like we can't even fathom that sort of liberty.
Yeah.
And we have so long to go. But the way our ruling class gets away with all it does to your country and others is in part because of the degree it's smashed its own working class here at home. And the ruling class knows it. And that's why they're so happy about the current state of politics, where everything's Trump or Democrats,
Yeah.
Republican Party or Democratic Party. Everything out to the other margins is gone politically. And they're so happy with that. And it seemed like we actually have debate. It's not a debate. It's a debate about what form of repression you want. That's all we're debating.
Yeah.
So
I mean, sexism here as well as in Mexico prevails, but there is a difference when you go into these communities. I feel like women are on the front lines. They're not just at home taking care of the soldiers, making sure. No, they're on the front lines as well in Chiapas. And there's also some issues and problems. I have seen the Comandante Marcos in Chiapas and things that have happened. But in these rural communities, I would invite people to look. I will post some documentaries and some links, but it is different from here. And I think when you have had militia or people like, I think in Oregon, was it that recently they were trying to have like their own establishment, trying to shut the government will not.
Yeah, and they were coming from the right, but that is something the government does not brook. It will come in and bring its apparatus in and smash it, which is why workers need to be able to be armed. The reason we don't even know that is because we haven't even had the level of resistance that shows us that. If you follow what's going on in Nicaragua with what's happening there,
Yes,
workers are coming to that realization. Damn, we need to be armed, you know. And right after the Sandinista government took power, the first thing they did was take their arms away, because they had need to be armed to make the revolution happen. But now they got to take their arms away. They know what they're doing. So that gets us back to gun control.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That's interesting because I didn't know we were going to hear about this. What's her name?
Mari Chuy. I don't know her complete name.
Okay.
I will just say. But
Do we have something to link to?
I will link.
And to the to some of these like self-running.
Yes,
communities?
other self-government.
I think it'd be interesting to look at.
There, that's like Mexico is a hub of these mini like anarchist communities being established because people are fed up.
Right.
They're tired. The police weren't protecting them. Drug trafficking happening. They decided to just arm themselves.
Right.
They cannot trust government.
Right.
I mean, when you have that level of pressure, where you feel like you're here, you know, people trust the police, trust the state, they trust their government. You can call your senator and say, my senator will listen to me, right?
And then nod his head and do nothing.
Exactly. In Mexico, I've said this in other videos before, people laugh at thinking that you can trust your politician.
Right.
And so these rural communities are like, we're not going to take them.
And AMLO is trying to refurbish that. He is trying to kind of
Yes.
say, look, there's a and he's going to do a tricky little. It's not
this.
a dance he's doing. He believes it, you know. But that's going to be his role, to partially rebuild some confidence in that government among the people of Mexico.
Yes.
And he's actually spoken to the needs of indigenous people. He's talking about putting people who've been in prison or threatened with prison in government. So he's doing some things, But at the end of the day,
political prisoners. Yeah.
yeah. But at the end of the day, he is the enemy in that. He is the Mexican workers' enemy in that project of revolutionary transformation that needs to happen, because he's trying to obscure that. So, very interesting. I mean, all I can say is that's very cool to hear about. I think what's so hard for people to imagine, I was just talking to my sister about that, is could workers in this country ever have that level of collectivity, collective action together? We are always being collective in terms of doing stuff, in terms of running cities, but in terms of actual collective management. And I think that is hard for people to imagine. So, but that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about when we talk about socialist revolution.
Yeah. All right. So this was on elections and criticisms on how we elect government.
Yeah, no,
this is really good
good
conversation. I think that this will. It also gives me I have not really looked deeply in the last video. I said this as well when we were talking about Socialism 101 into the Russian politics and how you have mentioned historical facts on how it has worked and how people were able to arm themselves and have a revolution. I have only surfaced it, but it's very good to know, especially for everyone, to think what would it look like. That's why I asked you, what would it look like to see, what would AMLO look like to as a true ally, to cause not just a reform within his party and within the government of Mexico, but or here in the USA, anywhere, like what would that look like to push for these drastic measures to really transform the way that the ruling class is governing. So it's a very good discussion to have.
So next week, I'm not sure we're on the same page, but I think we're thinking of discussing some of the stuff that's happened around Trump, NATO. Trump, NATO is, I've been thinking that's like a movie. Sharknado? Trump NATO? Anyway, Trump or NATO. Or the Russia stuff.
Yeah.
Something around there. Are we?
The investigation.
Is there anything else you're thinking about?
Happened Friday was the completion.
Yeah. And I think those are all in the same package.
Yeah. I think we can go ahead with that. Yeah.
So
we'll have a conversation.
We're going to be 2 weeks behind events, but we don't care. We're going to talk deeply about this stuff. And those of you who want to watch it or listen to it, because we're on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and we got our YouTube channel.
Full credit to Andy Lipson for doing all of that.
That's what happens
Thank you
when you
so
got
much.
Free summer and you're a teacher.
So I really appreciate that, Andy, and I'm so excited that we are finally on iTunes and podcasts.
Yeah.
So that concludes our discussion, and if you like anything that you hear, please check us out on iTunes for podcasts and Google Play, as well as you said Stitcher. I have not heard Stitcher.
Yes.
All right. So Stitcher, YouTube, 4 mediums.
Yeah.
And please share, subscribe, and
if you want to make comments, we ask you to make comments. We'd like that. And you were saying that people could actually suggest.
If you have a suggestion for a topic that we can discuss as it relates to current events, we will try to consider it.
That means no.
Well, it's just sometimes there might be, like, even we don't even follow our own. If you notice, we don't even follow our own topic suggestion. We said we were going to discuss North Korea. We never got to it. We said we were going to discuss teachers, WAVE. We never got to it.
Yeah, I talk about teacher strikes. I don't even talk about it.
So just bear with us.
All right. And thanks for joining us. It's great to have Eduardo back here in San Francisco. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Take care. Ciao.